in which it can be improved so as to positively influence learning outcomes. My name is Salim Tal, the Senior Program Coordinator of UNESCO ICBA, International Institute of Capacity Building Africa. I'll be chairing the session, but before starting, I would like to provide some housekeeping rules. I'm kindly inviting everybody to mute their microphone if you are not speaking. However, you can put on your video and microphone when you are speaking, although it's not mandatory. Please use the chat room to address your comments and questions. And respect of these arrangements will give us more possibility of hearing and interacting. The main objective of the webinar are the following. We improve participants' knowledge and understanding of the issues of teacher motivation in Africa, disseminate the various useful resources and tools on teacher motivation and support, and share practical experience that are adapted for the continent. To discuss those objectives, we have some expert presenters. We first have Dr. Binyam Sise Mendisu, Program Officer at ICBA. In 10 minutes, he will tell us about emerging issues on teacher motivation in Africa. Next one will be Dr. Mogos Yigezu, Associate Professor at Addis Ababa University. Dr. Mogos will talk us about teacher motivation study in Ethiopia in 15 minutes. And last but not least, we have Mr. Shem Okore Bodo, Senior Program Officer at ADEA. Mr. Bodo will present us the major finding of teacher motivation study in 3 Africa countries in 15 minutes. But before giving the floor to the presenters, I will have we'll have the pleasure to listen to Dr. Yumiko Yokozeki, Director of UNESCO, who will deliver the opening remarks before inviting Mr. Albert Nizenguva, Executive Director of the Association for the Development of Education in Africa, ADEA, for the keynote speech. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Dr. Yumiko Yokozeki for the opening remarks, and then after she will invite Albert for the keynote speech. Yumiko, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Salil. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Some people are putting their microphone and the video on, so please switch them off if when you're not talking. Thank you very much. So dear panelists, the participants, colleagues, and friends, warm welcome to you all from a very cold and rainy Addis Ababa. ICBA is pleased that to co-organize this webinar on teacher motivation in Africa with our important partner, ADEA. In particular, I want to acknowledge the presence and support of ADEA's Executive Secretary, Mr. Albert Nsengiumba, who is always enthusiastically supporting our work and currently as a governing board chair. So thank you very much, Albert. Since the publication of a teacher support and motivation framework for Africa, this book, I don't know whether you can see, in 2017, both ICBA and ADEA have conducted the teacher motivation studies in different countries in Africa. We want to use this opportunity to find out the state of teacher motivation in Africa and discuss the ways in which we jointly publicize the already existing studies, create the synergies among similar initiatives, and discuss the way forward. In addition to this, we wish to deliberate on possible ways of joining hands in order to develop a teacher support and motivation framework for the continent. For example, in the last few years, ICBA has conducted a teacher motivation study in Ethiopia and Burundi, which you're going to hear soon. Currently, Burundi is developing a teacher motivation framework in order to support their teacher policy implementation. I was a teacher in Kenya and Zimbabwe from 1982 to 85. So I know how teachers feel. Teachers are hardworking and in principle very motivated professionals, especially when they are recognized and then when they are rewarded either financially but also socially and emotionally, as well as professionally. I see it with very sad to see morale and motivation of teachers are going down, not only in Africa, but in many countries. This is a high time that discussion are held on this topic, and short-term and long-term strategies and solutions can come out to ameliorate the challenges, which has a serious implication on learning outcomes. If teachers are not motivated, if teachers are not teaching with the wholehearted way, there is no way that the learners can learn. So a large body of literature considers teacher motivation as a critical factor for students' learning outcomes. So I would like to thank all of you who are joining us today to discuss this critical topic, and also wish to express my gratitude to the presenters and the organizers. Thank you very much again. I'd like to now Mr. Albert, Executive Secretary of ADEA, to make a keynote. Albert, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Yumiko. That's really a great pleasure to join you in this important webinar on teacher motivation. Dear colleagues and participants to this important event, I would like to focus my speech on the ADEA experience during the COVID-19 in relation to teacher motivation. Of course, ADEA experience in teacher motivation started before the arrival of COVID-19 through a study in 3 countries. My colleague Shem will speak more on this later during his presentation. ADEA produced 2 reports during this time of COVID. The country status report in April 2020 on delivering education at home in African member states amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and a report on the impact of COVID-19 on Africa's education in August 2020, reflecting on promising interventions and challenges towards a new normal. These 2 reports highlight certain positive initiatives as well as challenges around teacher motivation. The positive initiative included the provision of an electronic listening service via a toll-free number and email address to support teachers in Morocco, as an example. The provision of digital resources for free access by teachers in Rwanda and Senegal. Monitoring psychological and psychosocial support to teachers through collaboration with other ministries like Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. Conducting training and focus group discussions in countries like Mauritius, Rwanda, Mali, and Morocco, and then providing social support in Madagascar, and last but not least, deploying multimedia in community engagement in South Africa. However, the reports brought to the fore some challenges with regard to teacher motivation. First is the inadequate provision of psychosocial support and cushioning to teachers. For example, through government bailout for private school teachers facing job losses. The second is the weakness in according teachers more respect, appreciation, and support for their important role in society. Teacher brings a unique connection with the learners. Thus, while there is some evidence of monitoring of psychological and psychosocial support for the well-being of teachers, particularly those affected by COVID-19, it is not robust enough. Therefore, there's still room for improvement. For the second engagement, we have the KICS Observatory that tracks evidence on educational policy and practice responses to COVID-19 in 40 GPE partner countries in Africa. I believe some of you were part of our last webinar in this regard. The observatory does this using a gender, equity, and inclusion lens, focusing on 2 core areas: First is in terms of continued operation of education system, looking at the changes in teacher training and support, learner support, assessment, financing interventions, and education system resilience. Of course, we all know that we are also in the era of digitalization, so digital technology is being used around this time, but that is not really directly covered by the observatory. There's another consortium covering that aspect as well. Second is on learner well-being. With respect to nutrition, learner health, and changes in psychosocial support. The observatory has so far deployed 5 online spreadsheet trackers, including assessments, teacher training and support, as well as student learning, school reopening, learner well-being, and education financing, and produce synthesis reports, a blog, and articles. We are looking forward to producing more synthesis reports, case study reports, policy brief, blog, and articles. And I see this kind of forum being so important to use as we engage into knowledge mobilization. The first policy brief that the Observatory produced in January 2021 on teaching and learner well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted some key issues around teacher motivation and also some successful initiatives. So let me name a few issues. Inadequate teacher preparation for remote education leading to stress and depression among teachers. Noting that teachers have insufficient opportunities to build their pedagogical and content knowledge. Second, also a setback on teachers' moral, motivation, and livelihoods, with few countries offering psychosocial support to teachers. This has negatively impacted teacher health and well-being. However, some of the observatory evidence of positive initiative in this area of teacher motivation in African countries is worth highlighting. For example, the Central African Republic has a continuous COVID-related teacher training program on psychosocial support. Nigeria provides psychosocial support to teachers and learners in addition to mounting a comprehensive back-to-school campaign and social behavioral mobilization to initiate safe school reopening. Rwanda trained 40,000 teachers on school safety to protect their health and well-being, while Tanzania's Tusome Pamoja project initiated a 10-week virtual co-creation with teachers on school safety, including teacher social and emotional learning and well-being. I wish to conclude by calling for greater focus by both key stakeholders, including governments, partners, and education actors in this area of teacher motivation, especially in these tough times of COVID-19, where we have to embrace the new normal on many fronts. Africa needs to enhance teacher professional development in remote education to build teacher capacities in the event of new school closures and future crises like COVID. And part of this requires establishing mechanisms for sustainable psychosocial support to teachers, guaranteeing teacher safety as frontline workers through robust mechanisms on the prevention and control of COVID-19, and providing institutionalized social safety nets for teachers. Let me again conclude by wishing you great discussions and fruitful recommendations as we proceed and try to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 in the Africa's educational system through supporting teacher motivation. Thank you again, and thank you to ICBA, especially to Miko, for inviting us to join this important event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albert. Thank you, Miko, for praising teachers, those frontline soldiers, and for the advocacy to better motivate them with providing them with better living and working conditions. Thank you also, Albert, for sharing experience of ADEA about teacher motivation and psychosocial support, especially during COVID-19. You have introduced the study that have been conducted in some countries, and Shem will be presenting them. I hope that your call for all school stakeholders will be heard. Thank you very much. So before proceeding and giving the floor to the presenters, I would like to invite everybody to switch on their videos so that we can take a group picture. So please, dear participants, you are invited to switch on your videos for a group picture. So Henok, you lead on that, please.
Yes, Salio. Okay, I think we have more than. I only see 9 people with their cameras.
Henok, I think you can make it to have more people on the picture, or you can take a number of pictures, but I think you can put more than 9. You put the large gallery.
No, I mean, I think it's only 9 people who have their cameras on.
No. You go to the 3 dots, and then there is a large gallery. There's a gallery and the large gallery, and then also together mode. If you put the large gallery, you can have 20 people.
Yes, we are a team here from the Gambia, Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Henok, did you see?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, it's ready. On 3.
Yes.
1, 2, 3. Okay. One more. Again on 3.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Thank you
very much, Henok. So, dear participants, you can now turn off your videos so that we can have a better condition of hearing. So without further ado now, I'm going to give the floor to the presenters, starting by Dr. Binyam Sise Mendusu, Program Officer at ICBA, who in 10 minutes will tell us about emerging issues on teacher motivation in Africa. So Dr. Sise, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Salio Sal. Can you see the slides? I'm sharing my slides. Can you see them?
Yes, I can see it. We can see it.
Okay, you can see the first page now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And okay. Thank you very much and welcome everyone from my end as well. I will briefly share a teacher motivation publication that we did at ICBA a few years ago, and some of the emerging issues that came out of that teacher motivation critical literature review. And I'll try to put that into some context. Let me start by quickly saying a few things about UNESCO ICBA. Our institution established in 1999, and it's the only Category 1 UNESCO institute in Africa. We have a dedicated team of 33 colleagues from 13 countries, and we're based in Addis Ababa. And our main mandate is to strengthen teacher policy and development in the continent. And we're very happy that we coordinate the teacher development cluster of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa of the African Union. And we work very closely, obviously, of the Sustainable Development Goals, especially goal number 3 of the global agenda. Let me start by giving a bit of information by way of background. You know, we talk of a teacher motivation crisis in the continent these days. And partly this has emerged because the last 2-3 decades, the continent has been expanding access to education. And some of those has to do with the global movements such as the Millennium Development Goals, Education for All, and recently the Sustainable Development Goals. So there has been big efforts to expand access. But these initiatives of expanding access has led to the recruitment and employment of teachers on a massive scale. And this in turn has an intended consequence of lowering the status and the moral and the motivation of teachers. And that's why some researchers talk about there is a looming or an existing teacher motivation crisis in Africa. And a second context probably worth mentioning is there is, with the Sustainable Development Goals, there is to meet the SDG 2030, the continent, especially sub-Saharan Africa, has to still recruit and employ 17 million more teachers. So we are experiencing the greatest teacher shortages in sub-Saharan Africa. And this means that the trend that I talked about earlier will be continuing, and that also means we will need more teachers, but at the same time we need to work on quality of teaching and teachers, both for the existing ones and for the new ones to join. So it tells a bit how difficult and how massive the challenge is that we are facing as a continent. And a little bit about teachers. For us, in UNESCO ICPA, we approach education through teachers, and we always believe teachers are the single most influential and powerful force for equity, access, and quality of education. And because of that, and because they are, they are at the center of an education system, they have the potential to reverse this crisis if we invest on them, if we develop their capacity, and if we empower them. And here I would like to quote the famous phrase from McKinsey 2007, who has rightly argued the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. Now, why teacher motivation? Why do we have to focus on teacher motivation? Some say, motivated teachers are the vanguards of quality of education. I think there is a lot of truth in it. And we understand that now with the Sustainable Development Goals, our focus is shifting into quality of education. And partly quality of education comes when motivated teachers are populating our schools, and they are teaching, as Yumiko said earlier, with all their hearts and minds. So that's why, and then we understand that there are several studies that show teacher motivation is directly connected to students' learning outcome and achievement. That has been documented with several researchers. And we believe it's really high time that teacher motivation gets a lot of attention by government, policymakers, academics, donors, and practitioners, because it's directly connected with quality of learning and quality of education. Now, this framework or this initiative of teacher support and motivation that we are currently working on, it came when we launched it on the World Teachers Day in 2016. we had the African Union, we had a big workshop, and one of the strong recommendations that came out of the participants of the workshop was there is a need to work more and to understand the teacher motivation situation in the continent. And they, in fact, said that teacher motivation has to be one of the major policy issues for the continent because of the looming teacher motivation crisis that I mentioned earlier. And then they also talked about the need to properly remunerate teachers, increase quality time on the task, and keep teachers in the profession. Have been some of the pressing and the very important teacher issues that the teacher policy needs to take into account, but government and donors and practitioners have to, and academics have to really study and understand. So what we did first was it's kind of an enrolling project initiative. So we have started to work on the literature. What do we know about the subject in Africa and globally? So we have published a critical literature review of teacher motivation in Africa and elsewhere. And the main purpose was to try to identify the factors and the issues that impact teachers' motivation across the continent and beyond, and to use that literature review and a study to develop a framework that countries can use in order to diagnose their particular situation and come up with some localized and contextualized solutions. And there was also a study that was planned, and the aim of that study was to understand what influences teachers in their career choice, how various factors impact their sense of job and satisfaction, and their capacity to teach, and their willingness to remain in the teaching profession. So that initiative had, as I mentioned earlier, a component of critical literature review and developing tools for data collection and collection of data and analysis. We aim for 10 countries, but we did so far a study in 2 countries, and you will hear from Professor Mogas later about the study from Ethiopia. And then we use all this information and all these resources to develop a teacher motivation support. And we are very happy that we are joining hands with ADEA to learn about a similar study that they have done in 3 African countries, and to discuss on ways of joining hands to develop, to support the development of this teacher motivation framework. And now some of the major issues that we have identified from the critical literature review. The first 3 points that I mentioned has got to do with the strategies that are being used currently in the continent. One shortcoming that we have noted is the failure to address teacher motivation crisis through holistic and joined-up policymaking. So similar to the issue that we raised in the making of teacher policy, there is an existing strategy or effort to address teacher motivation by way of either just addressing one particular issue, for example, a salary or something like that. So what we believe is that the teacher motivation crisis. Saliu, can you hear me now?
Yes, it broke off. Now you're back. Yes, you can hear.
Okay. Can you see the presentation as well? Okay.
Yes.
So one of those issues was the importance of am I still?
Yes, Binyam, we can hear you. We can see the slides.
The slide,
maybe
yeah,
you
it
can
has moved.
You can wrap up in 2 minutes.
Okay. I think it has moved one step ahead, and I'm trying to return it back. in any case, so one of the issues that we have raised in terms of the strategy was there was an issue of not addressing it holistically or comprehensively, rather focusing on one or two issues. The second issue that we have noticed was an effort hasn't been made to address the agency of teachers. Teachers have agency if we want to develop their morale, if we want to make them motivated, the importance of recognizing and acknowledging the agency of teachers. Teachers have agency, and that needs to be recognized, and they need to own their profession and their job. And then there is the issue of more focus on or less focus on intrinsic motivation factors. It's important that extrinsic motivation factors needs to get attention, but the most important thing in teaching is intrinsic. So that's a third strategy that we have noted. And now, in terms of the approaches that were used, we really insist that the social dialogue can play a big role. Teachers need to be consulted, and they need to be consulted and involved in understanding their particular situation, but also in finding a way to the solution to the problem. A second issue which has got to do with connection with approach was the involvement of the school environment and community at large. Teaching, as Yumiko was mentioning earlier, the social place that teaching have in a community needs to be worked on as well. And the motivation and the motivation and the attitude of the community and the school is very important. Finally, there is also an importance of to always consider the perspective of teachers. Teachers have a voice, they need to be rewarded, and they need to be supported. And they have an autonomy as an agent. So these are some of the emerging issues. I see that I couldn't move the... Sally, let me try to...
Yes, please, yeah, go ahead like that, yeah.
Okay, can you see, it can move now? Can it move?
No, we're no longer seeing the slides. I am no longer seeing the slides.
Binyam, do you want me to display it maybe?
Let me try it once and then... Can you see it now?
It's coming.
Okay.
It's coming, maybe. Yes, we can see it, yes.
Okay.
Key takeaways.
Key takeaways, yes. So I'm going to conclude by saying that, from the literature review on some of the studies that we have, what we have understood is that input remedies they are not sufficient and they don't work well. So we really encourage a comprehensive approach and a holistic approach to understand teacher motivation issues and to respond accordingly. Second point was teacher motivation is, we understand it's very complex, and it's influenced by both internal and external factors, and this also calls for a comprehensive understanding and response to it. Finally, the importance of, thirdly, the importance of striking a balance between intrinsic and extrinsic factors, and the importance of social dialogue, both as an approach but also a process. So we have in our website, we have published, I have links to the publications of our materials, and I encourage everyone to look at them and to get back to us or if you have any feedback. So thank you very much. Saliu, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Binyam Sise, for having conducted us to the process of the study on teacher motivation that IGBA has conducted, and for presenting us some the key parts, going from the critical review to the major components, the major issues, emerging issues experienced throughout Africa, and then the solutions that we propose to address those issues. Thank you very much. I would like to remind participants that they can address their comments and questions in chat room, and our colleague Alexis will be kindly conveying the questions and comments to the presenters. So thank you very much, Binyam, for that brilliant presentation. Now, I'm going to give the floor to Dr. Mogus Yigezu, Associate Professor at Addis Ababa University. And Dr. Mogus will take us through teacher motivation study that was conducted in Ethiopia. So Dr. Mogus, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Salu. Let me thank first the organizers for giving me this opportunity to take part in this webinar. I would also like to thank all participants. I'll be brief on some of the background information because Binyam has gave us very good background on the major emerging issues on teacher motivation. So I'll briefly, my PowerPoint is a bit bigger, so in the interest of time, I'll briefly mention the objective research method and analytical framework, and then focus on the major findings of the study made in Ethiopia. Maybe let me share the
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, you can see now. Okay.
Yes.
So is the outline, as I said, I'll briefly
But
touch
can you put it in Japora mode?
Sorry? Hello?
Can you put it in Japo mode so that can you put it in Japo mode so that it becomes bigger?
Bigger, okay. Okay, go do this. Right.
Would it be easier if Henok shared it?
Yeah, maybe
Yes.
He has the slides.
Henok, you have it? If you have it, you can share it and put it in Japo mode, please.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. So, yes, Professor Mogus, you can I mean, leave the screen mode, the screen sharing.
Okay. So I'm not going to bother you with the background. The objective of this study is to identify key and common teacher support and teacher motivation issues in Ethiopia. The study tries to answer what the key factors and issues impacting teacher motivation in Ethiopian schools. The research method used is a mixed one, employing both qualitative and quantitative data collection and analysis. The education context of Ethiopia is not very different from the rest of Africa, but over the past decades, Ethiopia has embarked on massive expansion of schools with the aim of providing access and achieving the MDGs and the EFA goals. As a result, we have today more than 23 million students. Can you hear me? Hello?
No, your voice is breaking off. If you can move a little bit, that would be good. There's an echo as well.
There is, yeah. Okay, let me check this. Hello? How's it now? Is it better? Can you hear me?
It's a bit better, but there's still that echo.
Hello? Can you hear me?
There's still that echo.
There is an echo. I don't know why. I'll speak slowly, maybe, to avoid the impact of the echo. So the massive expansion of the schools necessitated the large-scale recruitment and employment of teachers throughout the country. And this has negative results such as the deterioration in the quality of teacher training and the recruitment of less qualified and unqualified teachers. So studies show that massive and ambitious move to expand education has contributed to the unintended consequence of lowering the status and the status and lowering of teachers. Some even discussing a looming teacher motivation crisis in Africa today. With this background, let me proceed to the analytical framework I used to explain some of the factors in this study. Motivation is defined in various ways, but in the context of the teaching profession, it can be defined as the willingness, drive, or desire to engage in good teaching. So motivation is generally viewed as the energy or drive that moves people to do something by nature. The framework also mentions two important issues, dimensions, intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Intrinsic motivations are essentially linked to personal variables, such as personal history, attachment to certain values, experiences, and so forth, whereas extrinsic motivation refers to the importance and status given to the teaching profession, such as material reward, social acceptance, status accorded to the teaching profession, and job security. Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you very well. Go ahead, please.
Okay. So this analytical framework identifies a range of intrinsic and extrinsic factors that impact on teacher motivation, and has been classified in the literature into 4 categories. First one is the contextual, overall contextual factors. The second is systemic or policy factors. The third is the school level challenges, and the fourth is teacher level challenges. So following this framework, I'll try to discuss the major findings of this study conducted in Ethiopia. So there are a number of demotivating factors identified in this study. The major ones are the following. The first is the politicization of the teaching profession. This is the single most critical factor for low teacher motivation. It's happens to be the politicization of the teaching profession that constrains teachers' ability to deliver education, and political interference in all types of management decisions is particularly rampant and contributed to a weak accountability culture. And this type of contextual and systemic barriers largely emanates from lack of separation between the political ideology and professionalism, and this is conceived as a major demotivating factor. The second one refers to wages and remunerations. This is a key factor undermining teachers' morale and motivation at the systemic or policy level because of the low wages teachers are being paid, coupled with the declining status of teachers. Due to the undervalued status of the teaching profession by society, teaching is regarded as employment of the last resort by most graduates. And in addition to this, lack of decent housing is also identified as a major factor contributing to poor motivation. The third one is recruitment policies. Due to the teacher deficit prevailing in the country, recruitment of teachers is being made from the lower achieving ranks of students who take up the teaching profession as the last resort to be employed. In addition to this, many untrained teachers have joined the profession, to fill the gap with the shortage of teachers. Such practices brought up diverse categories of teachers with different educational backgrounds to the school environment. The fourth demotivating factor is the professional development and upgrading. The study reported that many teachers deplore the lack of opportunities for self-improvement. The criteria for promotion in positions of responsibilities are certainly defined but are not respected by the government or the authorities, and this is very often raised as one of the factors contributing to the low morale and motivation of teachers. Teachers have also criticized the political and social patronage prevailing in connection to promotions as an important factor in motivating teachers. Fifth one is management of educational systems. At the school level, teacher motivation depends critically on effective management. Teacher management is most critical at the school level, where the performances of teachers are crucially influenced by the quality of feedbacks they receive from school administration and supervisors. So the other point is absence of mentorship. So absence of mentorship programs for the novice teachers joining the profession and lack of accurate and helpful feedback to the in-service teachers are among the prominent demotivating factors. The other important factor is the psychosocial environment of teachers. A demotivating factor identified at the teacher's level is the huge impact that working and living conditions have on teacher morale and motivation and their classroom performances. So the key factors are related to poor learning conditions, such as an excessive work load, number of students and working hours, lack of teaching aids and extracurricular activities without proper compensations. Even those intrinsically motivated teachers would be demotivated when school facilities are poorly organized and teachers have a limited access to teaching and learning materials. One of the conclusions, poor living conditions have also greatly impacted the morale and motivations of teachers. So any teacher retention policy should be based on strategies that ensure the well-being of teachers by way of providing non-wage incentives such as social care, housing, security, and access to credit facilities. These efforts need to be augmented by recognition and empowerment of teachers. Studies suggest that the empowerment of teachers usually results in heightened motivation and a preparedness to commit to school-level activities. In conclusion, teacher motivation is a complex phenomenon that is influenced by internal and external contextual factors. Resolving the crisis will require a comprehensive understanding of the causes of the teacher motivation crisis and its symptoms at all levels, at school levels, teachers level, and policy level. A design of any teacher motivation framework therefore must take into account the broader national context of the education system, the underlying political ideology, as well as the cultural and social values of the communities in question. There is also a need to strike a proper balance between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. One cannot talk about intrinsic motivation and high-level needs without the basic physical needs related to food, shelter, and security being first met. Finally, I'll mention some key policy recommendations or proposals. First is separation between the political ideology and professionalism is very important to ensure a strict boundary between the two, and yet we need to maintain close collaboration between the political system and schools. The second is wage and new forms of remuneration should be considered because teachers are underpaid and consideration of performance-based pay scale as practiced in some countries can be considered. Professional rewards can be also considered. One can create official annual forums to recognize teachers and empower them. The other is timely information and communication. There is no information and communication policy in schools, so this is another important point. In the Ethiopian case especially, there are no functional teacher unions, so there is a need to encourage and establish functional teacher unions that could contribute to the positive motivation of teachers. Recruitment policies and deployment practices are also one area of challenge. So we need to put in place objective criteria and rigorous recruitment and deployment policy, as well as implementation strategies based on established norms and principles. Personality test is one of the recommendations. Introduce a mandatory personality test for all candidates who aspire to join the teaching profession to discourage candidates who do not have a calling for teaching. Professionalizing the teaching profession is another point of recommendation. We need to establish a licensing body with a mandate to certify teachers in order to strengthen teacher professional and career development. Last ones are instituting teacher mentorships, capacitating school leadership and management, and finally developing teacher policy. I think these are the main recommendations I have. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Salu.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mogus, for this brilliant presentation, which has taken us deeper into the background of teacher motivation with the demotivating factors that we can encounter, and also for taking us into the education context and providing us with some recommendations. Thank you very much. We are grateful for that. So I remind participants that they can use the chat. The chat is already very active. We have many questions, and I hope that Alexis is collecting those questions for the end of the sessions. So I'm now giving the floor to Mr. Shem Okorebodo. Shem Okorebodo is the Senior Program Officer at ADEA. He will present us the major findings of teacher motivation study in 3 African countries that Albert introduced in his keynote speech. So, Mr. Shem, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to share my screen, if that is possible.
Yes. Mr. Mogus, can you leave the screen share, please?
Okay.
Mr. Hanok? I think it's Hanok who's sharing. Can you leave the screen?
Please,
yes. Hi, Hanok. Hanok, can you hear me? Hanok?
I think he's having some connections. Shem, can you try probably to do
okay,
that on,
I will
on
just,
top of it?
I will just proceed without presenting them.
But you can try to use the share content, and then probably it asks you to.
Yes, he has left. He has left. You can share now.
Okay, let me see if that will come. Can you see it? I think I saw something.
It's coming. It's rolling. Maybe in a few seconds we'll see it. Yes, it's now on. You can see it. ADEA study.
Okay, are you able?
Yes.
Yes, are you able to see the full screen? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we are going to share our experience on the study on teacher motivation covering 3 countries, Kenya, Rwanda, and Senegal. And the study took place in 2018, and we did this through our Intercountry Quality Node on teaching and learning, whose champion is Rwanda. It's hosted by Rwanda, and the study focused on the motivation of secondary school teachers in the 3 countries. There was a 2-pronged purpose. One was to explore those teacher motivation factors and the associated socio-economic and cultural realities in the target groups in the 3 countries, especially the teachers, and also to develop a framework for interrogating selected non-monetary incentives for teacher motivation. So in terms of the framework of analysis, the focus was on 4 key areas that were considered as threats to motivation of secondary school teachers. So the study looked at teacher career development in terms of career pathways, responsibilities, promotions, and workload. The second area was in terms of teacher remuneration and incentives, looking at policies around this, and then the timely and consistent payments, non-monetary incentives, as well as processes for incentivization. The third area was with regards to social recognition and prestige of teachers. So looking around social respect, accountability to the community, inclusion in decision-making, and really leveraging the teacher's voice and autonomy. Finally, the fourth area was in terms of institutional environment, looking at the school ethos, professional relationships, and also looking at leadership, recognition of performance,
Shem?
stress. Yes, sir.
The slides are not moving, on my side anyway. I don't know if others can see.
Yes, I'm going to move it. Can you see this? Can you see the slide on introduction and analysis framework?
No, we can just see the first slide saying Adea study on teacher motivation in Kenya, Rwanda.
Oh, that is very interesting. Okay, let me see if I can. Oh, yeah. Can you now see it?
Yeah, now we can see it. Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So I was on that second part looking at the 4 key areas. So I was on the final one, institutional environment. We are looking at the ethos, the relationships, leadership, etc. So I would like to go straight to the findings because of time. And the study found that overall, the motivation status of secondary school teachers was really found to be generally moderate in the 3 countries. But of course, the status varied from country to country. The second overall finding was that non-financial incentives, such as being valued, recognition, support networks, and having stimulating workload were the most important factors affecting secondary school teachers' motivation levels. And finally, effective strategies for managing teacher motivation levels should essentially include valuing teacher feedback, investing in teachers through teacher professional development programs, and also offering higher education scholarships while periodically measuring and evaluating the levels of motivation. As you can see, some of these findings have already been highlighted by the previous speakers. So now I want to move to each of the 4 areas. The findings on teacher career development, we had about 5. First, the study found at the time, anyway, that career pathways within the profession were non-existent, leading to teacher dropouts. Secondly, those promotional opportunities that were available were found not to be transparent in terms of who gets to be promoted. Thirdly, the teacher professional development programs were found not to be well established, and the quality of in-service programs were not very inspiring. There was need to inject some inspiration in them. The fourth finding under this was that the recruitment and deployment process that includes transfers were found to be vulnerable to political influence. And I think this has already been highlighted. And then permanent and pensionable terms of service do provide a sense of job security that makes the teachers less interested in improving themselves. So, you know, they know that we have terms of service, they will get their pension, and therefore, some of the teachers did not see the need to improve themselves. So this is under teacher career development. Looking at teacher remuneration and incentives, a study found that there are salary top-ups instead of actual structured salary reviews, and also a lack of harmonized remuneration policies by qualification with other fields. So the issue of harmonization with other fields came through. Non-salary incentives existed, but these were not targeted to the needs of the teachers and were therefore not effective. However, there were stronger motivators that were found in the 3 countries, and these included housing, transportation, health insurance, food, school fees, as well as scholarships. I know there's one country where motivators such as provision of cows, dairy cows, was one of the examples that were highlighted. Then timely and consistent salary payment has positive influence on motivation. So these are some of the positive aspects. And of course, the second one is equitable remuneration and incentivization. Issues of security and access to social amenities had not been addressed sufficiently in the 3 countries for teachers deployed, especially in hard-to-reach or hard-to-staff areas. Moving on to social recognition and prestige, the study found that the demand by secondary school teachers for recognition as equal partners in the profession has not been dealt with effectively, in spite of the level of training of the teachers. Secondly, participation by the teachers in decision-making has improved in terms of their social recognition. But there's a lack of teachers' accountability to the community. And the study reinforced other findings that have been made that strong teachers' unions are important for teacher motivation. And more than sanctions, teachers' terms of service do not include recognition or awards for performing teachers. Now, on the final aspect of institutional environment, professional relationships with school management, collegiality, school ethos, and quality of students are significant motivators for teachers. The availability of teaching and learning materials and infrastructure do contribute significantly to teacher motivation. Lack of teacher autonomy in making decisions about learning processes reduces the teacher as a researcher instead of being a classroom teacher. And the final study found that the mode of implementation of any motivator, whether extrinsic or intrinsic, can either motivate or demotivate. And I think this has been highlighted by the previous speaker. So the process of intervention is therefore just as important as the incentive itself. So what were some of the recommendations that the study made? First was the need to create clear career pathways, initiating teacher development programs for all teachers, and supporting teachers to track their careers by creating more responsibility positions in management and senior classroom teaching positions. Second, a well-designed remuneration structure that is reviewed consistently is one of those recommendations. So equitable basic remuneration for employees with the same grade as teachers, looking at transparency in incentivization of the most critical needs, including housing, scholarships, or fee waivers. Third, there is need for social recognition and prestige, and this is possible when the teacher's visibility is improved. And this can be done through high-stake awards, community accountability, and participation by the teachers. There is indeed need to support strong teacher unions, which is really the voice of the teachers. Fourth, institutional support through enhanced professional relationships, inspirational school ethos, and leadership and disciplined learners are some of the key recommendations that the study made. And lastly, it is noted that motivation strategies for secondary teachers is inherently different from those of primary teachers. The status of secondary teachers reflect their level of training, and they need to be treated as equal partners and professionals. Since the image of the teacher is dependent on the society's image of teaching, there's need to rebrand teaching from being an occupation to being a professional. Finally, clear career pathways, professional standards, addressing human needs, basic human needs, the need for autonomy of practice, and all that are key in terms of the motivation of teachers. So the study recommends rebranding of the teacher's work through professionalization of teaching, and it sees that the professionalization model envisaged should be based on standards that are inspirational and which spur an intrinsic motivation orientation among secondary school teachers. So in summary, these are some of the outcomes of the study that we undertook in the 3 countries. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Shem, for this brilliant presentation of the study that ADEA conducted in Kenya, Rwanda, and Senegal, and for sharing the overall findings and the specific findings, as well as the recommendations, at the heart of which there's the professionalization of teaching and teachers. So we really appreciate that. So this was the last presentation we had to share with you, dear participants. I think Alexis has managed to collect the questions and comments and convey them to the presenters. They are in the chat. The presenters also are free to look at the chat to see the responses they can provide to the different questions and comments. So Alexis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Salyu. Starting with the first questions that had been presented, there's a question from Flora about Mozambique. Mozambique is currently designing the national teacher policy, and the issue of low motivation due to various factors is serious. How can we address this issue in our policy in a convincing way?
Thank you, Florence. So any of the presenters can take the floor to answer that question, and then Alexis will continue. But before moving, let me acknowledge the presence of our colleague Yao Ido, Director of International Bureau of Education, who has made us the honor to join us. There's also Honorable Minister, I don't know the name. If he could introduce himself, that would be great. But for the time being, let us give the floor to the presenters, and we'll give the floor to Ido and the Minister later. Binyam, Dr. Mogas, Shem.
Salyu, can I come in?
Yes, please.
Okay, just to briefly say that I know Mozambique is currently developing their teacher policy. And I think the two are very much connected. So the way I see it, the policy itself may not give a lot of details on the teacher motivation, on specific things like monetary or non-monetary incentives and those sorts of details. So what I probably recommend, and what we have seen elsewhere, especially in Uganda, and now what we are noticing in Burundi, is that they have their policy, and as the policy is being developed, they also have had a study on teacher motivation, a detailed study, just to understand what are the factors, what are the issues, what are the demotivating factors for teachers. So the two went in parallel, and then so they made sure that those studies which are made on teacher motivation inform the policy process, so that some strategies and some directions are put, because policy is more or less something at a higher level. And once they have done that, and the same thing happened in Uganda, then they develop a framework, a teacher motivation framework, which now can talk about more details and more specific strategies on the ways of addressing the issue. So that we have seen has been working, and probably that is something that Mozambique could follow. Thank you, Sally. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor back to Alexis to go with two other questions so that other presenters can answer to one of the questions. So
Sure.
Alexis, can you proceed with some more questions so that
Sure.
Binya, yes, Mogus and Shem.
Thank you, Salio. Yes. There's another question from Alpha Ba. What are the best known factors and practices that motivate teachers in a resource-constrained environment?
Is another one?
Yeah, if I could come in.
Yes, please, yes, Shem. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is the tricky but real situation in many of our African countries. I think issues to do with appreciation, issues to do with recognitions. Sometimes it is even just a question of making use of some of the policy and political platforms to recognize constantly, you know, the quality and the value of teachers. And then there are also other methods which can be used. We must, in my view, go beyond government and look at some of those creative ways. I mentioned, I think it's a case of Rwanda, where, you know, some of the teachers were being given, you know, dairy cows to start some kind of, you know, process. But there are also other examples, you know, even if it means just awarding teachers, but also, of course, sanctioning them, but awarding them during very important national, you know, forums and holidays, public holidays, very important forums where you have heads of state or ministers. I think we should not take teachers for granted. And I think sometimes even just recognizing them with appreciation beyond, you know, hard incentives would go a long way, especially where we know we're in a resource-constrained environment and going by especially the COVID-19 now. So I think looking at other ways, leveraging some of the locally available resources within either it is at the central level or sub-national level can really go a long way in making teachers feel appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Shem. Yes, Mogus, please come before I give back the floor to Alexis for another question.
Yeah, just a follow-up to the previous speaker said, we need to give recognition. The main thing is recognition and empowerment. But at the same time, the basic needs are very important. The very basic physical needs like food, shelter, security should be met as well to the reasonable standard. Otherwise, recognition alone cannot really motivate teachers. They have to live a decent life as much as possible. And then also we need to strike the balance between extrinsic motivation to keep teachers in the profession, just to add this point. Back to you, Salu.
Thank you very much, Mogus, for these inputs. Alexis, there are also some other comments in the chat, of course. Alexis, go ahead for another question.
Sure, thank you. Another question from Joyce. How can we maintain motivation of teachers in private schools where there are no government subsidies and most private schools are struggling and focusing on teacher well-being may not be a priority?
Okay. Please, Binya, Mogus, Shem.
Can I come in?
Yes, please.
Yeah. In case of Ethiopia, the private schools are also supported in various ways by the government. There are incentives by giving lands and other supports from the government, so that teachers can be motivated. Again, teachers in private schools are better paid. The system is better organized, especially since they are focused in the big cities. They have the facilities, and in our case, in the study we made, private school teachers are more motivated than the public school teachers for these reasons. They can ask for increase in salaries and other benefits. They can also move from place to place easily. They can change schools, and they can also teach part-time teachings, etc. So in our case, they are better motivated, but the government is also involved. Although they are private schools, there are a number of incentives being given to these schools to encourage them to keep the quality of education. Back to you, Salu.
Okay, thank you very much. Sam, Binyam, do you have anything to add?
Yes, yes.
Please.
If I could add, this is Shem. I think for the private schools, parents have got really a potentially bigger role to play in incentivizing teachers, because there's a bit of flexibility when you compare to public schools, and therefore parents can come together through their PTAs, or school management committees, and actually make decisions on increasing salaries or some allowances to some of those private school teachers. And the situation is dire, especially now, where we have seen, as part of our engagement with countries, many, or at least some of the private schools being closed. They are not able to get back, And so this is a time where the parents can really come in to help to get the private schools, going on. So parents really play, I believe, can play a big role in this. Back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Shem. So, Alexis, can you come up with two or three more questions so that presenters can answer to the question they have inputs to? Alexis, yes.
Sure. Yes, we have a few more questions, but here's one from Vidis. Apologies for my pronunciation. Have any of the studies that any of you have looked over compared education to other sectors? For instance, the health sector. It would be interesting to point out the differences and similarities and areas of learning if incentive schemes are different.
Another one, come with another one, please.
Do any of the studies conducted so far capture the political or social face of teaching and how the politics of the day can be a game changer in teacher motivation?
Okay, thank you. Mogas, Shem, Binyam, do you have any inputs?
Okay.
Or participants? Okay, go ahead. Mogas, go ahead, please.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Salu. Yeah, comparison with other in our cases, the salary of the teachers is better than the salary of the service.
Salu?
Yes.
Much better.
Mogas, we cannot hear you well.
Sorry. In terms of the salary, in terms of payments and incentives, teachers are a bit better than the other sectors, paid a bit more than the health workers or agricultural workers, for instance. The other incentive is also teachers are being given housing, priority in having houses also. So they are better than the other sectors, but that doesn't mean that it's enough and they're well off. But comparison shows that teachers are, more privileged than the other sectors. Concerning the political will, That was a major problem in our case. But recently, with the wider political reform in the last 2-3 years, policies are being changed. So we need to see the implementation through time. But there are positive developments in correcting some policies and also opening some dialogues with teachers. So there are positive developments in this regard. One point I would like to add on the previous question, Salu,
Yes,
during
very
the COVID-19, private school teachers were paid full salary. The government instructed to pay them full salary. The schools were paying, so the parents were paying part of it. So there is this kind of incentive so that they don't lose their jobs.
Thank you very much. Okay, Shem.
Back to you, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
Shem, before.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think the role of politics or politicians can be seen as a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I think politicians can actually change the attitude of society towards teachers depending on their utterances, whether they are on public forums or in lawmaking environments. I think if politicians keep, recognizing teachers in their political forums, it would slowly change the attitude of society. So they can actually be the champions of leveraging and enhancing the recognition of teachers. But as policymakers and as legislators, I think politicians can actually influence policy in such a manner that perhaps the teaching profession is reasonably comparable with other professions in terms of remuneration, in terms of allowances. We've talked about the health sector. I think the professionals in the health sector could be having even more allowances and levels of flexibility. And so these are some of the things that, the politicians can actually bring to the table to see how the teaching profession can be comparable with other professions in terms of policy reforms. So that is the role, those are the dual roles that I see politicians making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you, Moga. Thank you, Binyam. At this stage, I would like now to invite the Honorable Minister to share her or his point of view. I don't know which country he or she is from. If she could say some words before I give the floor to Ido for a minute. Honorable Minister, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everyone.
Please identify yourself and tell us something about the topic.
This is Honorable Claudiana Cole from the Gambia.
Ah, welcome. Welcome, Excellency.
Hi, Shem. How are you?
Fine, Claudina. How are you? Good to see you, Honorable.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
indeed. I'm very pleased. It's my pleasure to be part of this very important topic of discussion. And I want to say teacher motivation is something that is very important to the system, to the sector, and to the profession. Teachers need to be motivated so that they could give up their best. They could be more committed to the work that they have to do, and that is to help the children to learn, to facilitate learning. A demotivated teacher is no good in a classroom. So teachers need to be motivated. They need to have that confidence and self-esteem, and they need to be able to know that they are appreciated. Appreciated not only by the students that they teach, but appreciated by their school head and colleagues, need to be appreciated. They need to know that they are appreciated by the ministries of education under whose purview they are serving. They need to be able to know that they are motivated by, they are appreciated even by their teacher, by the parents of the children they teach. I was a teacher for many years before I got into administration. And I know how much appreciation I enjoyed from the parents of the children I taught. And that made me to be more committed, very, very much committed to my students. And my whole interest was to give up my best and to make sure that the students learned. They were taught well and they learned a lot. They gained a lot. So it was no different then to now. Teachers now, like before, need a lot of motivation, a lot of motivation. And especially in these challenging times where you have COVID and everything, and these have all been challenges to what teachers do and how they do their work. So for us, I think here in the Gambia, we are paying a lot of attention to that, to motivate our teachers. I had someone talk about teachers being well paid than many of their other colleagues, and that is true for the Gambia, because here we pay the teachers their basic salaries. We pay them 50% of their basic salaries for teaching on double shift. Especially now with COVID, and we want to have the social distancing in our classrooms. It has reduced the number of pupils in a class, and so it has given rise to the situation where we have more classes in our schools, and the teachers who have been posted, unless they teach morning and afternoon, all the children will not benefit from learning. So they get 50% of their salaries. And then for those who are posted to what we refer to as hard to reach areas, these are difficult areas in the rural areas where normally teachers will not want to be posted because of the distance and the lack of facilities, etc. We give them up to about 75% for female teachers who are posted in those areas. It depends, it ranges from about 30% to 45% to 50%, but as high as 75% of their salaries for female teachers particularly. And they receive other allowances like transport allowance, they receive zonal allowances, they receive even retention allowances. Definitely teachers in the Gambia are well paid. But notwithstanding, we also have the Gambia Teachers Union, whom are our partners. We have a very good collaboration with our teachers union here in the Gambia Teachers Union and the Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education. We work very closely, we work hand in hand, and they also give support. They provide land for teachers for their accommodation. In fact, recently they have even got into the business of providing accommodation in schools for teachers. Just about 3 weeks back, I went to lay the foundation for our teachers' quarters in one of the very remote areas in this country. So all these are in consideration of the teachers and their well-being so that they could be motivated. And motivation, mark you, we learned in educational management that motivation is not only about money. It's not only about incentivizing teachers with money, but motivation is both intrinsic and extrinsic. Even the conditions around them, the appreciation, the way we treat our teachers, all these are very important for their motivation so that they are able to give up their best. So I want to say that government cannot do it all, but we have partners like the teachers unions, our teachers unions, and perhaps other entities, institutions within our different countries who can always also come and contribute their quota to helping to motivate teachers. Because after all, it is the students that these teachers teach who go back to these institutions, parastatals, and other businesses, entrepreneurs, hire them. So if they contribute to motivating the teachers, while they're teaching these students will turn out to be very good students, and they can go back and work for them. So it is not only government who is supposed to be responsible, but motivation of teachers should come from all stakeholders. This is my belief, and I want to think that we will continue to look at this important topic more closely, and then we can all put our hands together and see what can be done for teachers. If there were no teachers, I wonder how our countries would have developed, because the people who are in the different positions of responsibility to develop our respective countries were once sitting in classrooms and they were taught by teachers. So teachers have a great role to play, but they also must be recognized and appreciated and motivated well so that they could give up their best. Thank you very much.
Wow, 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 wow. This was another great presentation. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Really that it was a must for us to give you the floor, and really we learned a lot from the different points you developed, talking about different level of appreciation and recognition of teachers, the necessity to involve all stakeholders, what the Gambia is doing to motivate teachers. I think we must encourage the Gambia and then encourage other countries to learn from Gambia's experience. Thank you very much. Jerejef kontaan nañu. So now, I don't know if Director Ido is with us. Ido? Ido? So if Ido is not with us, we could only take the words of the minister as a concluding.
Yes, Chimap.
Ido, you are with us. Okay, Ido.
Yes.
Thank you for making us the honor to be present in this webinar. I give you the floor for 1 minute to share us some input, some insights.
Oh, thank you very much. Just very quickly, Honorable Minister, dear colleagues. No, it's just one thing about the teachers and the motivation. I heard a lot of interesting things, but I just want to remind us, I don't know if you guys remember 2 years ago, the doctors in Germany, because they went to see the minister when Angela Merkel increased the salary of teachers, and they went to see her saying that, yes, the doctors have come. They say that we are doing a very hard work and you have increased the salary of teachers and you didn't increase ours. And the teachers are the most best paid. And you know, the answer she gave them was amazing. She just told them, why do you want me to pay you more than those who taught you? So you see, but you know, it was symptomatic of the role of the teachers. Unfortunately, today is not the case. I'm very happy to hear that Madam Minister was saying that in the Gambia, the teachers are well paid. We also heard in the discussions, the motivation should not be only based on funding, but some other things can be interesting for a teacher to be motivated. You know, their involvement in the school management is one of the things. That's why the countries where you have a good decentralized education system, where the headmaster in a village, for instance, has a high responsibility, and where he involves the teachers in the managing of the school daily actions. In these schools, you can have very good, very well motivated teachers and very good quality of teaching. And the last thing I want to say, you know, we are working in the IBE on curriculum issues. You know, one of the biggest challenge for teachers is that the majority of teachers do not master well the different national curriculums that are agreed on by the country for the implementation, and they are not involved in the process, and so they don't master it properly for a good teaching. So, and even the learning material that are proposed, are elaborated, are not very well sometimes in line with the content of the curriculum, and teachers can have problems. So what we are trying to advocate in IBE for our support in member state is in each country, how we make sure that the curriculum elaboration process is more participatory, and above all, it give window to teachers or teacher unions to really be involved in the process, because the best way of getting them involved, and they can appropriate and they can get also motivated in teaching it. But I just wanted to say that I'm very happy with everything I heard, and I want to really congratulate again ICBA for organizing this. It's a big challenge, and really IBE, we have decided to work closely with IBE, with ICBA, because we are working the content for learning in schools, and the natural, there should be an alignment with teacher training contents. So our partnership should be increased more to make sure that what is taught, what is supposed to be taught in class is really well mastered by teachers. So we are going to increase that partnership. Thank you very much. And then really congratulations again for organizing this.
Thank you very much, Director Ido, for this insightful intervention, which reinforces the intervention of the Honorable Minister. Of course, you just confirming the saying that teaching is one of the professions that creates all other professions. I would even say this is the only profession that creates all other professions. And also insisting on the necessity for teachers to master the curriculum in every country, and the best way for them to master it is to involve them. So teachers must be involved in all the process. So thank you very, very much, and we really appreciate your intervention, and we look forward to further the collaboration between IBE, ICBA, ADEA, and all other organizations. So ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the additional minutes, but I think it was worth it. We have listened to the presenters, and to you participants, to the Honorable Minister, to Ido, and from the most fruitful discussions, we have got confirmation that teacher motivation is directly associated with students' learning outcomes and achievement, thereby quality of education. As McKinsey said rightly, the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. Therefore, a great focus must be put on qualified and motivated teachers, and that motivation can be financial or material or any other form, as recommended by the Education 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. I quote, "We will ensure that teachers and educators are empowered, adequately recruited, well-trained, professionally qualified, motivated, and supported within well-resourced, efficient, and effectively governed system." End of quote. ICBA and ADEA and all other organizations, I would just say even IBE efforts, aim to reach that objectives as shown by the studies presented in the webinar. A similar webinar in French will follow to enlarge the scope of dissemination of these studies. You will be informed in advance about the date. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for your active participation, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Can we say those who wanted the presentations, please send, please look at the chat and send your request by email.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, colleague. Thank you, dear VIPs.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Ido. Merci beaucoup, Ido. Merci, on est content.